I'm just introducing the Pansy Project panel, and I think everybody's going to introduce themselves. And somebody took the chair. Brilliant. What a day. Take it away, guys.
Hello. This is a 45-minute chat about 20 years of homophobia and transphobia. It's going to be really funny. I'm Paul Harfleet, and I started the Pansy Project in 2005 in Manchester, and I've been planting pansies pretty much since then. I think in 2006 was the first time I planted pansies in Liverpool, and I've been back and forth over the years, so I have some knowledge, but not all. But when I reached the 20th anniversary of the Pansy Project, to commemorate it, I wanted to create some moments of conversation, and I asked Jane to gather me some people that knew about Liverpool and the history of homophobia and transphobia. So we're going to have a chat. We're going to chat for approximately 35 minutes, and then we're going to have approximately 7.5 minutes for questions. So unless there's something very urgent that you need to say during the panel, we can wait until then, if that's okay. So, Chris, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Hello, thanks very much. So my name is Chris, I use he, him pronouns. As you can probably tell from my accent too, I'm not a native local, but adopted one. I've been here for over 15, 16 years, and I've been working with LGBTQ plus youth for over 10 years. So that's kind of my angle, and I'm just a kind of classic cis gay man. So that's my background that I can speak from. Just one of the classics.
Thank you. Ollie?
Hi, I'm Ollie, and I have too many jobs. I came to Liverpool not really having a lot of confidence in my activism, not really having a lot of confidence in my art itself. And this city has bolstered me. It has given me a platform to speak about anything and everything I want to, which is amazing. And that's what I'm continuing to do now in my work. And it involves a lot of discussions about displacement, about marginalisation, about homophobia, and I feel blessed to be on this panel today, so thank you.
Thank you.
Hi everyone, my name's Ant. I also use he, him pronouns. I'm queer, I'm autistic. I'm also the chief exec of Sahia, which is Liverpool City Region's oldest LGBT and HIV support charity.
Thank you and welcome. I also use he, him pronouns, just so you know. I guess I wanted to ask you all what you felt the experience of homophobia and transphobia is in Liverpool, and what your vibes are about it, and how much knowledge you have over the last 2 decades, and answer in one word if you can. Not really. Anne, you go first.
In one word?
No.
I think it is on the rise again. I was just looking at some figures this morning. Reported hate crime, don't quote me, over 1,000 targeting our community in 2024. About 560 alone in Liverpool. Levels of violent hate crime against trans folk are on the rise. It's a scary time, and it's fueled, I believe, by what's going on internationally. And obviously Trump, I've got a lot to say about him.
So I'd say a lot of my experience of homophobia in Liverpool has been shaped by what you just mentioned there. When I've left the soft warmth of queer spaces where I felt included, I have been met with, I hate to say it, but they are all straight, ket-wigged, and wear a lot of black. And I have had the experience of realising pretty quickly that I have been existing in some lovely bubbles, to be honest. And I have felt like I had needed to arm myself and equip myself to be able to discuss with these people. I say discuss, but it will turn into an argument. And I've also taken a lot of measures to keep myself safe, whether that be the privilege of the fact that sometimes I can present completely feminine like I am today, or whether that be just putting myself away completely and saying that I can't go outside. And that is a sad fact, but something that's continuing to happen. And I definitely think it's because of the far-right rising. But I also think, in lieu of all the discussion around adolescence, it is the lack of funding towards mental health services and community services that will save these children from ignorant groups that profess to give them that family and that warmth. But yeah, that's my experience.
And does that marry with your sort of recollection and feelings about it too? There's been a rise.
Yeah, I'd say so. I think that they've both pretty much summed it up from a shared experience, I suppose. And from working with LGBTQ plus youth over the last 10 years, I think that they see the same. And obviously, maybe at some point we'll come on to talk about the more systemic and institutional stuff that is more than Liverpool, but is also seen here, whether it be through in education in schools, as well as maybe like in the streets, for example, and also online, obviously, is a massive place for where people experience homophobia, transphobia, and biphobia. But yeah, so it's everywhere. But at the same time, I don't want to say that it's everywhere, as in like, you know, the like it's ubiquitous for everyone. But yeah, there's many different places that people experience it.
Because it does seem the elephant in the room is Trump. So because it is, my experience seems to reflect that he and his people that he works with just are like weaponizing trans people in particular, and that has had an impact internationally, of course, and nationally, and here. I wonder, do you know how the figures you mentioned and are they higher in Liverpool than they would be in London or Manchester, for example?
I wouldn't know, and that's only reported.
Yeah.
So just to add to that as well, I think if I was to describe the situation here, I'd describe it as insidious, and that's a very strong word, because Ollie hit the nail on the head. It's about, there's division within our community within itself, and you will see those targeted who present as queer. So, you know, we don't all experience this the same way, and there's attempts from within and outside the community to divide us. So if you can present as, you know, in their inverted commas, normal, absolutely fine, and they'll set you aside. Oh, well, you don't appear that gay, you know. But if you can't or you don't want to, why would you want to? If you want to present as queer, that's who's targeted, and we don't all experience it the same way. And heaven forbid you happen to be a person of colour who's trans or non-binary. You know, we have to point that out. That's where they're getting it worse.
Because I wonder whether because I've been doing because I said it enough, I think, but planting the pansies for 20 years, in the beginning I had a sort of strange idea that I wouldn't be doing it 20 years later, because it would have got better in some way. But it actually seems like it's even more urgent than it was when I was planting initially. To be clear, I first started planting pansies to mark my own experience of homophobia, so I'm not a tourist. It happens and happened. It happened and happens. But I wonder then, do you feel like it has got worse over the last 20 years? I suppose I'm much older than you all, but you know what I mean.
Well, I think, honestly, when I went to school, and it's so interesting to talk to my Gen Z homies about their experience, because when I went to school, gay was a pejorative. I could never present as anything that sort of denoted my bisexuality. It had to fit into a box that everyone could understand. And then moving away from that to now, I feel so thankful that children in school now, growing up, have a lot more room to be able to be who they are and be themselves. But that insidious word you used, I think, comes up because even if they can be themselves, it's themselves under capitalism. It's themselves under what's palatable for everyone to see as queer. So really, I think it's just sadly evolved, if I'm going to be honest. It's different, it's more underhanded. You might not necessarily notice it if you don't see the dog whistles, but they're there. And I think now it's in convincing, well, most of my time is now convincing people that it still exists and it still is happening. And even though it might not be the sexy, salacious thing for BBC to report on or Sky News to report on, these attacks are happening. And statistically, and when you think about it psychologically, a queer person, a queer neurodivergent person, isn't going to report it in the same way. So I think there's a lot of things still happening. It's just that it's just not at the forefront as much anymore.
Does that reflect your experience with young people? Do you think they think it's worse now or better, or do they think about those things, the history?
I think we actively talk about our history. I think one of the things you see through the performances of young people today, and through some of the previous speakers as well, is the importance of connecting with your elders or your community, who have lived through different generations and different things. So young people, again, not to harp on about it loads, but due to the access of the internet, you can learn a lot more about your history. You can go on YouTube and see videos of ACT UP where you might have just heard the stories before, or if you were lucky to meet someone who was there. So they're learning more about those things, but it's also a way of learning about, it's also a way of communicating the homophobia, seeing the vitriol out there, and, you know, whether it's your own social media platform or community group, or you're mindlessly scrolling through it, you know, an app, it presents itself in front of your face, you know. It finds you in a way, and young people talk about that and they experience that. So, and I'm sure we're all got different levels of awareness of that ourselves, but I can only imagine being, you know, 12, 13, you know, discovering yourself as a queer young person, and then also having to come to terms with the amount of kind of hate that they face kind of indirectly and directly towards their community, yeah.
Because that makes me think about the spaces. I don't know what because my memory of visiting Liverpool is the difference is we in Manchester, but I lived in Manchester for 20 years, the village was very sort of there, but I watched it evolve and become the gay village, and then I watched it being eroded by hen parties, and then it becoming something else. But it seems that there's been the gay quarter, I think it's called here in Liverpool, that's been slightly contentious, has it not? Am I wrong about that?
I personally think it's a little bit contentious. Only as a POC queer person, I don't necessarily feel included. I have gone to many club nights where it's not even about looking around and not feeling the inclusivity by just the patronage. It's in the language, it's in the promotion of the event, it's in the event itself. I do not feel seen, I do not feel represented, and I feel a lot of POC people do feel that way about the gay quarter. It's a really complicated discussion to have without trying to detract from what has already been set in stone there. Like, it is a beautiful place to go to, and it is a beautiful celebration of queerness. But I can't deny that I don't feel included when I do go to certain events or certain bars in that area.
Then in London, there's Black Pride and there's spaces, but I think it is obviously a global issue, clearly, but that it is a shame that Liverpool might be worse, perhaps, than it might be in Manchester. I don't know. I've not really been to the village in Manchester for a long time either. But anyway, We're thinking about Liverpool, not Manchester. So what do you think, Ant, about the spaces here?
I think they're much the same. I grew up in Manchester. All the time that I grew up in Manchester, I didn't come out. The village was available to me. It didn't feel like a safe space to me. I didn't come out until I was 33. So I was very, very late coming out for various reasons. You know, the risk of being exposed being one of them. I grew up in the 90s. It feels very similar as it did then in Liverpool now. I think there's pockets of absolute queer joy and beautifulness in the Pride Quarter. And some of the drag queens in particular, drag artists there, do an incredible amount of activism. But I do echo what Ollie was saying about inclusion. At Sahir, we support LGBT refugees and people seeking asylum. And we'll often in respect to the Pride Quarter, get stories retold to us about them being turned away at the door because they don't have the correct ID, and door staff won't accepting kind of the ID that refugees will have, and it's their only ID. But I wouldn't say that issue is just restricted to Liverpool. I would assume that it's the same everywhere. I think it's a societal issue.
Do you think there's anything... I don't know whether this is just me being biased towards Liverpool or against Manchester. Not that I have any of those biases, I don't think, but maybe because I'm in Liverpool right now, I'm pro-Liverpool. But is there something particularly unique about Liverpool? My vibe, my feeling is it's a bit more politically engaged than Manchester is, and especially maybe London, I guess, but it feels like there's just a bit more of a sort of, banning the sun in Liverpool is great, but that sort of, is there something unique about Liverpool, is my point, in terms of how activism and politics manifests?
I think, like, Liverpool wears its heart on its sleeve, so as soon as somebody pisses off Liverpool, they'll tell you about it, and rightly so, So a couple of years ago, there was like a bit of a, I don't know if the word spate is right, but there was a series of like hate crimes, homophobic hate crimes that, that people became very aware of very quickly, and there was a lot of anger about that, and it was largely queer young people who mobilised together to like take over the city centre a bit and march through town and get politicians to some degree, varying degrees involved, whether they want them to or not. But the point being is that, I think that for me was like, that's Liverpool, like it can come together and react really quickly when it wants to and mobilise, and it will do, when it wants to wear its heart on its sleeve. So, and I think sometimes I don't see that from other cities or towns.
That also makes me think about the police. So this pansy I planted a couple of weeks ago outside New Scotland Yard to protest how they dealt with the Heclina case, who is a drag queen, a famous drag queen, who was visiting from San Francisco, and their body was discovered in a house in Soho Square. And the way that the Met Police dealt with the case was quite shoddy, to say the least. And I planted a pansy to kind of raise awareness of that and to highlight and promote a protest that happened on Monday. I've sort of spoken with and I've been on panels like this with the police, and as individuals, often their heart is in the right place. How do you think the police are doing, and how is that reflecting in Liverpool specifically, do we think?
I think you've hit the nail on the head. Individuals, brilliant, and we can pick out who those individuals are, and often they're also members of our community. I've met with the Police Crime Commissioner, I've met with some senior officials. They say all the right things, and I do believe that their heart's in the right place. But, and it's a huge but, the police are still institutionally racist. The police is still institutionally homophobic and transphobic, and unless we address those systemic issues, nothing's going to change. The community does not trust the police. This is why we'll look at the reported hate crimes, and the actual levels of hate crime are significantly more, because people just don't trust them to come forward and say anything. It happens on a daily basis. We have people present to our services every single day with issues, that things that have happened to them that should quite rightly be challenged and reported to the police, but they just don't. They'll come to us instead and say, what can we do? What can we do to support each other, rather than what can that institution there that should be there to support us, what should they be doing? So, yeah, difficult one.
It is really hard, because I started the Pansy Project when I experienced 3 separate instances of homophobia in one day. It didn't even occur to me to report it to the police. I thought it would be much more efficient to plant pansies there. It obviously hasn't worked that well. But
what is it? What do you need the police for? And like why do we need them for? And what can your community not provide that the police can provide? And I suppose, like, ultimately, what you kind of want is the criminal some justice, or and it's not happening. And I think that's like, it's not just about trust. It's like, again, working with loads of young people, and we say, do you want us to help you phone the police or report this hate crime? And they go on to do it in often cases, and nothing happens. I'm not saying it's necessarily the police's fault, the person, you know, who's doing the thing on the other end, but it's just a bit like, well, what do I need you for? Because I get my like community, my emotional support from my friends and family, and I wanted you to help me with the justice element and bring the perpetrator to justice, and it's not happening. So why are you here?
I think it's really difficult because there's a difference between clearly there's justice that needs to be done in very severe cases, but my kind of thinking and the origin of the Pansy Project is based on that flippant comment that someone will make in the street, which in my mind is a few steps away from violence. But that microaggression is something that just chips away at you and chips away at anyone over years and years and has a massive impact. When I remember being on a panel with someone from the Met Police who said, it's our responsibility as queer people to tell the police, because then the police are able to allocate the correct policing in the correct way to deal with the justice side of it. But, you know, that is all well and good if the institution is racist and homophobic. So it is a hard thing. Do you have any ideas how to fix it, anyone?
I was just going to say that I'm going to fix it. No,
Please do.
I was just going to say that the police need to be on their hands and knees with a rebrand. Like, they are not only structural, but institutionally racist. And a lot of queer people, a lot of queer POC people have had so many just instances of dealing with the police and the systems and been so traumatized by those experiences that we have to, or they have to, undo that before they victim blame queer people and say that it is our fault for the reason that they aren't structurally and institutionally changing. I think it's really easy to put the power in a queer person who has been through a violent act and go, you should do this, and this will benefit us societally. But the fact is the facts and figures are there. Like, the statistics are there that they're not pulling from, and they're continuing not to pull from. And in the talk that just happened, we were talking a lot about, like, getting up and analog activism and actually trying to write to MPs to try and change laws. I think that's a lot of what needs to happen now. But because it's such a tangled web with the police, a lot of people see that mountain and don't want to climb it. So I think it's encouraging each other to be like, no, we need to speak about this and we need to change this. And it is something that can be changed because, yeah, it can just seem like it's impossible, but it is possible, I think.
Good. And?
I'm just thinking about an example. I believe that you planted a pansy in St. John's Gardens.
Yeah.
Because of some of the attacks there as well. So we've been having relatively recent conversations with them about cruising. And I think fundamentally there just needs to be a huge education piece there because they view the world through this kind of cis heteronormative lens. They don't view the world as we do. They need, and this harks back to a lot of the issues that we had in the 80s where, you know, predominantly gay men were being targeted who were cruising, cottaging, and so on and so forth. There needs to be this fundamental education piece about who we are, but they need to be on that journey. They need to want that journey. They shouldn't be, it's what Ollie was saying, really. Why should we, as victims and as those who are oppressed, have to lead on that journey? Really, it should be them, not us, you know? But I'm just thinking about that St. John's Garden piece, and it was even difficult when we were having those conversations because it was a case of, you don't need to be involved in this conversation. I was like, well, I do need to be involved in this conversation because if you're criminalising someone who's engaging in sexual activity because they don't feel safe any other way exploring their sexual identity, or just because it's part of their cultural identity, that's who they are, why shouldn't they be able to do that as long as it's keeping them safe and everybody else? And at the same time, these people are getting raped and attacked in those spaces that they thought were safe for them. So yeah, I think it's a really challenging one. One of the things that we've started doing is inviting police in a really measured way into our safe space. So we're flipping it on its head because often police will be like, well, you need to report crime this way. use our systems, use our digital technology, ring this phone number. If you can't get through, try again. And we're like, well, that's not good enough. So we flipped that narrative on its head.
Because there's actually, because the reportit.org is the organisation or the website that you can record hate crimes, and I've used it before, and in a way it feels less good than not reporting it, because you're just shouting into an empty room, it feels like. So there's nothing actually feels like it goes on. And back to your point, where you actually get more support from the people around you in the community than the police. I guess another question that I had listed in my notebook that's in my brain was the idea of community and how that has developed and evolved, and has that evolved in a good way, and how has social media helped or hindered that? Discuss.
Well, I was just going to say about Liverpool, to be honest, because you were comparing sort of the prides of Liverpool and Manchester, and there was a big community response to capitalism becoming the focus of the Liverpool Pride, and in sort of queer people coming out and being like, this isn't good enough, we don't want this, we're going to do our own events if you're going to do MasterCard, blah, 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 blah. I think that those sort of things and those sort of discussions wouldn't happen without community. And I think that social media, as amorphous and not great sometimes it is, in terms of community and bringing people together, it's been invaluable. There are people that feel very uncomfortable coming into queer spaces for the first time, like you mentioned, and through Instagram and Blue Sky, not Twitter, Blue Sky, they've been able to sort of sit digitally in those spaces, get comfortable in those spaces, and then approach doing it physically. And I think that's the thing that social media gives us now that we didn't have before, because if you feel unsure about your identity, like especially in queer spaces when you have an identity that might not be necessarily accepted, like if you're an asexual person or a bisexual person, it's in joining those communities online and then having people validate and accept your experiences in that way that they feel like they can go into those spaces and really experience that queer joy.
Because the algorithms have changed so much recently too, because of the lovely Mark Zuckerberg and that other guy. It makes it harder to find each other. So TikTok, which I've used before, you can really find yourself just watching rugs being cleaned, which is what I like. but then you also can find people, the algorithms serve you better in a way on TikTok, even though it's problematic for lots of other reasons. It's tricky. I think the challenge that Facebook and the other ones have, Blue Sky is interesting because they do seem to have a different model. I saw an interview with the founder. She has a different perspective, so there's positivity there, I think. And I suppose we use it in a particular way. I don't know what that point was. I was just saying things.
Are you going to start planting digital pansies?
Well, I've got every planting I've made, I put on a Google map. So you can browse the map, and I've made a tiny weeny icon, and you can click on it and the image will come up. But there's a risk that, because it's on Google, there's been some movement of different people and organizations moving away from Google too, because they think it's going to somehow, they're just going to pull that map and I won't have it. I've got, obviously, records of every planting, but it is a tricky thing.
I feel like planting digital pansies on some of the threads that I read on Facebook particularly.
Yeah, well, there is, I've made the actual icon, so it could be, there is now, isn't there like sort of, you can make your own emojis. I've already done it, so I should just, I don't know how you do that, but you can tell me afterwards. How are you doing for time? Okay. So I thought that was the right time in my mind. So it's now time for some questions, if anyone would like to ask a question from the audience. Okay, there's a question already, go. Can we have do we need a mic to go over there? Do we have a mic to go over there?
Yeah, I've got this one. It's on as well, yay.
Oh, gosh.
Thank you.
Now this is making me nervous. I'm only going off of this on the information that I went out and I decided to look at it myself. And when we're looking at instances of, and I'm specifically talking about the police with this. So I know this is gonna sound pretty radical, but I actually don't think that police should be a thing. I think as people that live amongst each other, we can manage to work through community to solve a lot of our issues. Because what I'm finding is, I study law, by the way, so what I'm finding is, when I'm looking at statistics that show 80% of police officers commit domestic violence, and then on top of that, those cases don't go anywhere, they just disappear into the void. When I see instances where women are basically saying like, I feel unsafe, or this has happened to me, and I've reported this to the police, and then CPS will then decide, oh, there's not enough evidence, even though those people are gathering that evidence. If people are doing the jobs that police should be doing, how do we as queer people trust that we're literally watching it in real time? How do we as queer people look at that and we're like, you know what, I'm gonna place my trust in you to do what you're supposed to do, even though I've already been doing this whole time. So why should, and I'm not looking at this from the perspective of a black person, because I've had my fair share of traumatic instances with the police. I'm looking at it from the perspective of somebody who wants things to change, who wants to actually see things work the way that they should, as opposed to whatever. I don't know what this is, but I just call it a mess. Whatever mess is going on, I'm just watching it and I'm thinking, whoa, what am I supposed to do with this? So,
yeah, because the question is,
sorry,
what do we do?
Yeah, what do we do?
Because, well, it is about, to your point, isn't it? That there is a chance but there is a chance to fix it. We have to do it.
Yeah, I definitely think that. But back to what you said, I think that's the government creeping in a police state almost, when they assign all of these different community activities and things that may happen to being police work. I think that, like, completely takes away our agency as a community. Police are there to deal with crime and then also do some things that we ask them to do. At the end of the day, we are the citizens, but what's ended up happening is that they're telling us how to deal with our own communities. And I think that's a fundamentally broken system, because they aren't always in our communities. And it's great that there are some police officers, like I definitely have known a police officer who's a great person within such a horrible system, but at the end of the day, if there's not fundamental activism, if there isn't like real change that's being pushed for, the police will just continue to be what they have been, which is scary sort of figures in our society that we are fearful of going to with our issues, which isn't going to be great if you've been through a homophobic attack or if you've experienced anything like that.
Because there was, I remember on the streets of Manchester, there was a moment when there were the guardian angels. Do you ever remember those?
I think they're still
Are they still
in some
around?
form, yeah.
Maybe we should fund them.
Well, that's what I
We
was
did
going to
that.
say. It is maybe it is like defund the police and give us the money. Like, how about give us the money? Like, how we all know there's no money in arts and queer arts especially, but we have heard the value of the activism through ACT UP and whatever. Imagine they had a few quid in their pocket to be able to magnify or amplify the work that they were doing. So it's a little bit like, why are we spending so much time talking about how we can make the police better and just be like, well, we'll just have the money and do it ourselves. Because as you said, like we know probably our needs better in terms of a community, in terms of what makes us feel safe, whether it's the guardian angels, which was probably a response from the community locally being like, wouldn't it be cool if there's queer people in high vis walking around in the evening that we thought, oh, they're a safe person to speak to. So give them the money, like you said.
I feel like that started in San Francisco or New York. I vaguely remember. But so you do that, and then so I think that's a thing, isn't it? It's quite a hard.
Part of it is about agency to do this as well. So, like as a leader of a queer organisation, we're always mindful that we're community-led, and unless we are empowered to have those conversations and feel that we've heard enough voices, we don't feel that we're able to. Because I'm speaking as one, not I want to be able to speak as many. So part of that is the activists in all of us coming together and saying, this is what we want, and specifying that. Because the last thing we want is to create another layer of bureaucracy. And as a white queer man, I'm very mindful of that. and speaking on behalf of a very vast and different community.
Because it's this actual event being called Homotopia Takeover is really interesting in this context because of the Pansy Project and the way I've been working, I've worked with lots of different queer arts festivals around the country and beyond, not to show off, but the fact is that often they don't really talk to each other. So they're doing things in silo in a way, and it could be that I've had these conversations with other people where to bring all of those organizations together in some sort of queer arts board or something. So I'll do that. You do the Guardian Angels. Let's have other questions before we forget. Yes.
I'm curious about the conversation.
Oh, yeah, sorry, what microphone? Yeah.
Oh, yes, right. I'm curious about the conversation regarding the way that the internet and algorithms in particular are affecting people, because I'm aware that on both the left and the right side of things, people engaging with social media and going down particular pipelines leads to both queer people essentially abandoning all hope and falling into despair and then not doing anything, and then people who are more on the right getting radicalized and then falling into those pits. I'm wondering if you have any perspectives on how to stop that process from happening, because it's such a common thing across the political spectrum.
Well, I think the interview I saw with Blue Sky was promising in that department, because you can, apparently, I'm not an expert, but you can add different little widgets or something to kind of create spaces that aren't used, or they don't digitize them in the same way. So you create communities that aren't just echo chambers. It seems like that. Does anyone else know anything else about that?
I was just going to say, when it comes to social media, it's about mindful consumption. I've definitely gotten to the point of completely doom scrolling and going through video after video and not critically engaging with it enough, and just sinking into a depression and despair and thinking that it's completely unsalvageable. And I've said to myself and I've said to my friends that routine breaks from social media and actually going into your community, again, that analog behavior of being like, I'm going to speak to queer people in my community, I'm going to go into queer spaces, I'm going to take up that space. Doing those things, I think, keeps you from that radicalization, because like you said, it can happen on both sides. But I feel like when you are speaking to real human beings and engaging with it with your body, it's a lot harder to sort of descend in that way. And I think TikTok, to be honest, as great as it is a big proponent of that, because people do want to say things to be seen and they do want to sort of package things in an interesting way. So I think that we can't really expect them to be responsible. We almost have to be responsible of ourselves and just take ourselves out of that mindset, because all queer people throughout history have definitely felt helpless. It's about making sure you're okay within yourself and doing that self-care when you get to that point and being like, hey, I don't need to be an activist today. I actually need to look after myself and think about all of the information and articles and world events that I've just let course through my body. Because it's a lot. It genuinely is.
And coming to things like this is actually a lovely thing. You had a question. The microphone. Wait for the microphone.
Thank you. I don't know if it's a question, but it's just going back to a point that was kind of mentioned at the beginning and in the previous panel. And this easily can turn into a conversation of us against the world, but it's also looking at our own foundation within the community. And someone mentioned, transphobia within the queer community, or other identities being left out or misunderstood. And it's like, where do we look at ourselves as well in terms of supporting each other and making sure we're setting an example and setting the right foundation for a chosen family and community, so that when we go out there and report things, we are understood. It's because a lot of times I feel like we don't look at the people that you might be having relationships with or your family members, and it's like, oh, why are you reporting an abuser, an assault, or someone who's groomed you? And I don't know if any of this is making sense, but it makes me think about how we also have to be introspective and work on de-shaming and looking at the internalized homophobia, transphobia, etc.
That is interesting, given how capitalism works by making us do things and buy things and not just being. Because I spend a lot of my time drawing in things and then just allowing myself to just think and not do and not consume. Having time off consuming is a really valuable thing, isn't it?
Yeah, I was just thinking, like, linking the last point almost to that a little bit, is that, well, social media is like gives us lots of windows to see things, and like that's really cool and things like that. Actually, it is about sometimes physically being together and being in community spaces like this, and that's where we get to learn from each other and learn how each other heal and how we experience. And you might not even identify in yourself your internalized queerphobia, homophobia, etc., but someone else might be able to identify it in you from their experience. But we get that through being together, and you don't always get that when you're alone in your room scrolling through social media, regardless of how kind of present you think you are doing it as well. So what am I trying to say is, like, I think the value that I find through my work of having physical spaces where queer youth meet, 50 to 60 young people a week come each week to be together and learn from each other in terms of how to be. And some people have been out for years, some people have just come out last week, and all those kind of things. There's just something in that, and needing to have those physical spaces for us to exist safely and to be able to open up about things as well.
Have we got time for one more question? One more. Yes, Michael. Is it what are you wearing? Michael Mark. Michael Clark. Oh, hello. You're not Michael Clark, but I like Michael Clark.
Yeah, I wish it was Michael Clark. It's really just to build on what everyone's been saying about how important community spaces are, but also material objects over there, the actual physical planting of the pansies. And when you said it was on Google Maps, I always worry about us being beholden to forms of digital technology and social media, as, like, me and Monica came up through zines and posters and stickers and badges and I don't know if anyone remembers, Tumblr decided to change the algorithm and erased so many queer lives. When people use Tumblr to curate their lives, including some friends that were documenting, again, in terms of pedagogy, going through top surgery, work around black queer AIDS that I had students working on, like Marlon Riggs, and that was just gone at the flick of a switch. The algorithms can enforce normativity, and I think we have to be so invested and precious about being in these spaces and communicating in ways that are not beholden to digital forms that corporations and capitalists control, because they can switch us off. And that, as well, is an act of homophobia. When Tumblr changed its algorithm, that was a homophobic act. We tend to think of homophobia as on the body or in hate speech, but it can happen in much more subtle ways that erase our voices and deny us connections. And just to add to, I'm glad you've preserved what you're doing in a physical form, because the exhibition today is made up of ephemeral objects, and that's how we tell our stories.
It is interesting because the Pansy Project Facebook group that I started in 2008 or 9 or something, one day it had maybe 10,000 members, and one day it was just removed because the way that I named the photographs after the abuse, so the algorithms flagged it as an abusive group. But it was interesting because it was policing the comments. So you could argue that it was good that it did it and found it, but then it didn't understand the context. And now we're in a different position where Mark Zuckerberg has decided it's difficult to be offensive on there. So it is really challenging. So we're out of time, are we? Have we got what time for one more? One more question. I saw you first in the back with the red hair. We do need the microphone right in the back.
Sorry.
You're doing a lovely job. Well done.
Thank you.
Hi, thank you. Sorry, I've written some things down, but because I would forget it otherwise. So we were talking about social media and blue sky, with like X and Facebook seem to be dominated by the far right. And as they're dominating these are places where we spend most of our time, and these are our social spaces, through emotionally charged and populist messaging, and they're weaponizing working class anger against LGBT people, people of color, immigrants, and people who are not the enemy, but people who are maybe believing to be. So do you think maybe our movement and other solidarity movements on the left has become perhaps too intellectualized and maybe too passive or even too fragmented? And are we spreading ourselves perhaps too thinly across many internal debates and issues when we might be better focused on confronting the rise of violent fascism and the threat of, killings and systemic harm? So, I mean, what I'm asking is, should we be maybe embracing some of those dirty tactics of the right and being more disruptive and being more unashamedly just, like, brazen with it, I don't know, maybe if we're being a bit too, like, nice. Yeah.
Sorry, you finished.
Yeah, so but yeah, just sort of like, are we, because it can seem inaccessible to a lot of people, because there's a lot of academic and a lot of intellectual discussions that we're having today, which is fantastic. But like as an active movement, I wonder maybe should we embrace some of those dirty tactics that are being used to fight against us?
I honestly think it's a division technique. Like, we can have more than one argument. We can have more than one fight. And I definitely think it's being pushed by the far right that we're so fragmented and we don't know what we want, when we clearly know what we want. We want trans people to be recognized as people. We want to be able to be married. We want to be able to have the same rights as a straight cis person. So I think, honestly, that's fear-mongering, if I'm going to be honest, saying that we might need to use some of their tactics, because personally, I'm never going to absolve my morals just to push like an idea. And when I see the far right doing some of those things and indoctrinating people, they're not changing people's minds. They're not teaching anyone anything. They are literally just indoctrinating them into the cult of personality of Donald Trump. Like, that is literally what's happening. So, yeah, that would be what my response to that is. I think that as a community, we are a large community, so we are going to have a lot of different issues and pressing issues, country to country, state to state, constituency to constituency. But the more that we have conversations and, like you said, have community spaces where we can talk about these things, the better. And then we can organise from that outset. But again, I do think it is a far-right rhetoric to say that we are disorganised and we don't know what we want, because we do.
I think from my perspective, I get what you're saying about the intellectualization of the matter. For me, there's something powerful in quiet activism, telling stories. The two tactics that are used by the right, they use fear and othering. The only way to break that down is to share our story, to tell stories about individuals, to kind of to bridge those stigmas and those misconceptions about who our community is. We're spoken about in these kind of broad terms, but we don't center on human beings and individuals and tell their stories. That's how we got through the 80s. That's how we got through the HIV epidemic. We looked at the focus on the impact on individuals, and I can pick out stories to this day of individuals that we spoke about who was lost to HIV and AIDS. Terence Higgins, there's so many names, and that's how I think there's some power there in breaking down those barriers.
I think there's something we can all do, and probably do on a daily basis, which is exist, and we go out and about and be ourselves, and that is something that people often don't want us to do, but is a really powerful thing to do. So, for example, what I'm trying to say is, like, I know a lot more queer young people who are openly queer in school, and schools be like, oh, there's no trans people here, therefore we don't need to adjust our policies or whatever. And as soon as the trans young person goes, I actually am trans, I'm here, and they go, crap, we're actually going to have to look at our policies. Just by existing, and also not just by existing, but by opening up about their identity, they've created change in systems, and they haven't had to rally together or learn law, about how to change policies, because they know that there are some laws out there that exist to protect them, like the Equality Act 2010 and Human Rights Act, that people want to erase for because they want to erase us. So there's something just about existing, and I think we can all do it and being yourself and destroying what people think about us and that we're, I don't know, weird. And we're weird because that's a good thing, not because they think it's a bad thing, kind of thing. So anyway, yeah, just by being yourself in school, in workplace, wherever you are, you're really doing something for our community, I suppose, is what I'm trying to say.
Not to be completely selfish, but the thing about this, the Pansy Project, is it does do something that is like what you're talking about. It's doing something that is technically, I'm doing something illegal. It's guerrilla gardening. So I'm breaking the law, I'm being really controversial. But as soon as I'm doing it on the street and someone comes up and says, what are you doing? 9 times out of 10 when I tell them, they're like, oh, that's really lovely. And it's quite hard to be angry at that flower being placed at the bottom of a tree. It's kind of one of those things. So I don't believe we need to go down a dark road either. I think we need to just find new ways to be kind, to kind of like blow them out of the water. That's more important in my mind, I think. So with that lovely word I just said, kind, I'd like to thank my panelists, Chris. Round of applause, please. Ollie. And Ant. Thank you for coming, and I have been Paul Harfleet. Thanks so much.